you were actually a massive inspiration of pushing me to get into Founder Pass. So why don't you start there, and I'll go get your slides. Guys, give him a round of applause.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting stuff. So yeah, I guess I'll tell the early Founder Path story from my perspective, which is basically I started Badger Maps like 10 years ago, a little more, and I started doing debt deals in like 2015, I think, maybe 16, and debt back in those days, as some of you may recall, was not as good of a deal as it is today, right? Like the lenders have a difficult time wrapping their arms around the concept of like ARR and MRR. They're like, that's not an asset, that's not collateral. Like and then lighter capital came on the scene first, and they raised a ton of money, and I forget how much, $60 million or something, big team, and so to make the economics work on that, where you're going to pay off your investors at 12% or whatever they take, they to pay for that big team, they needed a pretty big spread on the actual deal, right? So the debt was super expensive. Next, then other players started jumping in, and there's also like there's different types of debt players in SaaS, right? There's like the GoLubs of the world. That's actually their name. It's a huge, I don't know why. GoLube, GoLub, I don't know, but that was their branding, and so they come in like later if you're like $10 million and above, and I think you have to have institutional investment to get their money, right? So that's kind of the scene. Is like, if you're an early stage startup, there was just nothing at those times, and when Lighter came on, we could at least we could get expensive debt, which was better than no debt, right? And because it turns out that's one of the major ways companies lever up, and I had over like a 5-year period, I had different experiences with different SaaS debt providers, all these early players, and I was a very active shopper of debt. I would.
By active, he means he had a spreadsheet of like how many people on that spreadsheet, and there was like 150 or something.
Everyone that could potentially loan a SaaS company money, I had like talked to and knew about, because it turns out I really needed money, because it's like way easier to get debt than revenue.
The things a lender doesn't want to hear.
But so over time, I kind of gather experiences, gather data about this industry. And I forget exactly when this happened, but Nate was in town in San Francisco, where I used to live, and we were shooting the shit about the debt industry, and he was really interested in it and poking around at it, and he figured out that I had made basically a hobby of learning about debt for years, so he was trying to pick my brain. And I gave him all my stuff, and he went after this market and has really changed it a lot. I mean, it's...
what did you say in terms of the product that needed to exist that didn't exist?
What didn't exist, well, I mean, the products that existed were more expensive for starters, but they weren't willing to loan very much, right? So I think Lighter would do like 3, and I'll get into this in my slides. I don't want to blow my slides, but Lighter would do like 3 or 4x MRR, which is like, I think I was doing like $2 million a year or something at the time, and I was like, really? Like, you're going to give me like $300K? Like I make $1 million, $2 million a year. $300K isn't a lot of money, man. Like, because real companies, they'll let you lever up, pretty aggressively, right? To one turn or something at least. And so I guess that's the real key difference, is how much they'll give you at what rate. And a lot of the lenders also had a really short duration, which now I'm really ruining my slides, but that's okay. Oh, right. These are my slides.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Let me create an on-ramp here, right? So you guys already sort of heard about like what you're going to learn from current debt, what to watch out for, and then how we use debt to scale to $5 million. Are you comfortable sharing how much equity you've managed to keep today?
Yeah.
All right. How much do you own?
65.
65%.
Well, and the other co-founder owns like 20.
And
then a
family.
third. Yeah.
Is there a dad?
There's a dad that I've squeezed money out of him too.
Okay, a dad. I didn't know there was multiple.
Yeah, no, well, only one dad.
One dad in as well. But the point is, you've kept control.
Yeah, I mean, I think we sold 10% of the company, and that was like super early on before I even had thought of debt. But
And you've already tried to buy them out, I imagine.
No,
Negative. Okay, we can give you more depth.
they're all really smart. They're like private equity guys, so
Okay.
they're not going to be like, oh sure, here take for 2x.
So let me pass this off to you. Start here to give everyone context of your revenue growth, and then these are your slides that you sent last night at 2
Perfect.
a.m., Steve.
That's me.
Love you to death. Take it away.
You know me, man. All right. There's not like a coffee spot up here. So that was. So that's what we're looking at. This is my little history right here. Very smooth, right? I mean, one little hiccup from COVID there, a few pricing adjustments, but like very smooth, right? Who needs debt with a business this smooth? I mean, why don't I just, spend within my means? And the fact is, in reality, these businesses aren't that smooth for a lot of reasons, right? You've got annual deals, you've got multi-year deals. I've got a seasonality problem being that people don't buy software in November or December and hardly in the first half of January. So, and every year that builds up, right? So you get a lot of that spikiness, and then any big deal that comes in makes it more spiky because the big deals come in the months that people already wanted to buy software. So anyway, it allows this to be smooth, right? Takes out your seasonality, allows you to, without giving up equity, make payroll in December, which is always a problem. So here's our website in 2012. It's not that different from our website today. I'm not going to lie. I mean, this design might even be better. You get a marketing team. I don't know. It's definitely better today. But this isn't bad. This is what we looked like in 2012. And the first way I funded the company was by. Let me zoom you back to 2012, right? And maybe some of you are in situations similar to this today, where you've got 4 people on the team, and you're making $50,000 a month or something. And no, I guess I was probably making $25,000 a month then. And it turns out the basic needs of a software company, the care, the food and water that it needs, engineers and sales guys and product managers, they cost more than you can make at first. So money has to come from somewhere. And so you either have to have money in your pocket already, or hopefully your mom's rich or something. I mean, but I was lucky in that I was able to fund the early parts of the business without equity because I had worked at Google and early enough, so I had like $1 million to just light on fire basically and become broke again. And so that's what I did. But in the course of that, I managed to build a piece of software. I didn't build it; the engineers built it there. But I needed to keep paying them, and so now it's 20. So I started having it built in 2012. Now it's 2014, and I'm just super broke. And the company's probably making like 280K a year-ish. So like 25 grand a month-ish. And we had four mouths to feed. I wasn't feeding myself. I was just living on peanut butter. But my co-founder was leaving because he's a really smart guy and was like, he's in private equity. And he was like, this thing's just not going to go anywhere, man. This thing is just toast. It's just, we should just throw in the towel. I'm going to go work in private equity again. Turns out it's a much better job. I didn't say I recommended starting a software company at all. I never said I recommend. If you can get the $1 million a year job in private equity, go do that. It's so much easier. It's an easier life. So he was out the door, and I had these 4 employees. One of them I was having spend half his time do consulting stuff, and that was me. So we were making ends meet. And then I got this $300,000 deal I'd been working on for a long time. And I guess the question here is, how do you get a large company to give you $300,000 when you're like 4 joker guys? And we were working out of the back of a dentist office at the time. We didn't tell them that. So the key there, we gave up a really interesting term that they took, and what that was I traded for paying 3 years up front, It was like $308,000 or something. I traded away. I promised not to sell the product to their two biggest competitors for that 3-year period, which they really liked. They thought that was really cool. They thought this was a competitive advantage. And they were like, yeah, well, these guys, and they understood, they knew that we were like 4 guys. They understood the risks, and they were okay with it, given that they could keep this away from their competitors for 3 years. And so that deal basically floated the first 3 quarters of 2015, and then revenues had caught up to what our costs were, and then the next time we made an extra $5,000 a month, we could hire somebody. So that is our first financing was from customers. So here's our debt history, and I think if I wanted to zoom out and offer a takeaway, it's that you got to shop this stuff around, right? You got to dive deep, and that, if anything, with debt, I shopped it around a ton and figured out who are the players, where do they fit. I should have made a slide about this, but with who all the players are, but the lighter ScaleWorks and which now they're called Element, FounderPath, and then those are kind of the ones that I think are the most focused on the SaaS industry right now. So I started out with lighter because they were first. ScaleWorks didn't exist, FounderPath didn't exist, and so I borrowed $888,000 over 2 years and 4 tranches. They were all about like 220 here, 250 there. This is an Rbf loan. Who knows what an Rbf loan is? One person? Revenue-based finance. All right. So what a revenue-based finance loan means, these suck, right? I shouldn't say that. They're okay. But what it basically means is they take a cut of your revenue on a monthly or weekly basis. The reason they kind of suck is because it's very hard to plan around. You don't know exactly. You don't know how much you're going to give up every month. The good thing about them, there is a good thing about them. If I'd gotten a big revenue-based loan right before COVID, that would have been great, because then revenue hits the skids, you end up paying back less. So you are nicely aligned with them. But if you grow quickly, then these loans can become really expensive. Like on a percent basis, probably like 25%. But if things hit the skids, you could pay 3% interest, right? Like they want to get their money back someday, right? So you're better aligned, I guess, with your lender, but they're annoying in that they tend to work out in their favor and be a little more expensive. I think for me it worked out to be about 18% because we weren't that good at growing. But if we had been good at growing, it would have been a lot more expensive. So key terms to watch out for, and I'll go over this, a slide on this later, but one of the key terms to watch out for, these guys had a term in there that I don't think is too uncommon, but I didn't catch it. I mean, I went over this contract with a fine-tooth comb, but didn't catch this. They had a term that if we wanted to exit the loan early, like after 2 years, it was a 4-year loan, if we want to pay it off after 2 years and take our money somewhere else, we had to pay them all the interest as if we had been there for 4 years. Which is like, fuck off. So the way I got around this was I did another tranche with them. So my last tranche with them, I basically just did because I wanted to renegotiate the terms. And I was like, okay, I'll do another $250K with you, but we're gonna have to renegotiate the terms. And so I got that term redlined because I think they knew it was worth the bullshit. And I don't even know if they put that in today, but that's a key term to keep your eyes out for. Unfortunately, these documents are like 40 pages long with a lot of these lenders. So, key thing to understand about them, they would loan to about 4x MRR. And these guys, that tends to be not super negotiable because it's what they've promised to their LPs. So obviously, if you're loaning 8x MRR compared to 2x MRR, it's way more risk, right? It's way harder for a company to pay back. It's pretty easy to pay back. It's pretty hard to imagine that a company couldn't pay back a loan of 4x MRR over 4 years. I mean, you'd have to be shrinking, basically, right? So their rules were such that they can only go to that level. Story short, ScaleWorks offered me a better deal. So better deal in terms of more money, and also a better deal in terms of cheaper money. And I told Lighter, hey, here's these guys are offering me. Can you match it? And they were like, we can't break the 4. So I went to ScaleWorks, and they went to 6, if I recall. I borrowed $1.5 million over 3 tranches from them. And the more tranches you're getting, the better, right? Because you're matching your spend with I guess, well, the more you can match your spend with the money that you're bringing in, the lower your ultimate cost of capital is going to be, because you're holding the money in your bank account for less time. So, in a perfect world, you'd do a little loan every month for whatever you're paying for. And what I've always done with these loans, which is not like, the smartest thing to do with loans. Like, the smartest thing is like, oh, I've got this funnel over here, Google Ads, and I pour, 20 grand into it a month, and 25 grand comes out the bottom. So of course I should do that every month. That's like the perfect thing to do with debt. What I've always done is I've basically had 5 extra engineers because I've had this debt, and I've had them since 2015, right? The team's always been 5 extra engineers bigger because of debt. So, and frankly, early on, I had 7 engineers instead of 2, so it was super material. Now it's less of a big deal, but engineers is actually still a big deal. You get a lot more done. So even today, this stuff is super useful. So the terms on the ScaleWorks deal was a 4-year deal, 17% APR. So a little better, still 4 a year. We should talk about terms as well. The problem with a shorter term loan is it creates a ton of risk, because they don't, and a lot of the debt providers that make loans to SaaS companies want to do like a year or 18 months. Super risky, because, especially right now, as we're seeing, like the finance market's not stable, right? Like you can very easily run into a circumstance where the interest rates are going up and they don't want to do another deal, or they feel things get risky. If you're counting on that money because you've made a longer term investment, and almost all the investments we're going to make are at least a year and a half, 2 years payback, and you need a time horizon longer than your actual payback, or else you're basically just putting the money back in that you borrowed, right? You're not actually you need time. All our costs are, for the most part, monthly costs, and so you need to take the money in, spend the money over a year and a half, and then get value out of it, create more revenue, your MRR goes up, and then you're paying back the loan for the next 2.5 years with that increased MRR. And if you came out ahead, it was a good idea to take the debt. If you come up behind, it was a bad idea. But if in a fast-growing SaaS company, it's always a good idea. Our return's way higher. So it's always basically even fairly expensive debt is always a really good deal, because if your return on that capital is 50% or 60% and it costs 16%, you're way ahead.
Steve, can I stop you for a sec?
Yeah.
Okay, so does anyone have, this is like a good cycle of questions. Does anyone have, just yell them out. This is more intimate room, so we can do this. Any questions about these structures?
Yeah.
Sounds like you're using it for product development.
Absolutely.
Did that bother you at all? And what was the term on the Lighter loan?
Well, like I said, it's not the perfect place would be like ads or something where you get a quick payback. Product development, it's even worse than like hiring salespeople, because salespeople pay off, in my opinion, at a sales or marketing or anything on the revenue side, pays off faster, but at a lower ultimate rate. Engineering resources and actually making the product better, creating that extra feature that wins you extra deals, pays off at the highest rate, but over a longer period of time. And that's why it's so important that you don't get the short-term loans that I'm trying to think of the companies that are really big, like Pipe, and there's a bunch of companies. 3/4 of the SaaS lenders are like, they want to do 1-year deals, which you can't invest in human capital over 1 year. It doesn't pay. Even a salesperson doesn't pay back fast enough, because it's not just time to break even. You had to invest the money, and then you start pulling money out, and you need time to pay back from there for it to actually make sense. So your question was, what was the exact term of the Lighter was 4 years. All these are 4-year loans.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah. How long did most of your product investments go pre-revenue before you started, throwing sales at it and actually seeing? That really adds to your time to pay back all of that lead time.
Yeah, this is important, right? Like well, first of all, you can't get this kind of debt unless you already have revenue. These are all revenue-based debts. It's very hard to get loans. You got to get equity capital if you have no revenue. But I think a founder needs to start selling before you have the product. So so before you invest in a sales team, before you hire your first salesperson, and before the product's even built, someone on the founding team, they have to have ownership, they have to have control, they have to have a seat at the table, needs to be out in front of customers, pushing your message, and it can be, and I'm talking about hundreds of people. Like you have to be, who you think your ideal customer profile is. You've got to get out and get in front of those guys and really, hey, this is the thing I'm building. I think I'm building it for you. If that's true, would you buy it for this much money? And that's really important, the buy it for this much money part, because no one's ever going to tell you that your baby's ugly, right? They're all going to tell you have a beautiful baby, but if you ask them, hey, would you actually adopt the baby? They're like, oh no. I mean, it's a totally different ask. So I think it's really important that you're selling this stuff before the product. When the product comes online, you should have a whole bunch of people that you've already talked to and are all lined up saying, they've already nodded their heads and said, yeah, I would pay you, and I would pay you that much money for this product if you can build it. Then you can come back and be like, hey, here it is, all built. And they won't all buy it, but some healthy percentage should. And that's, so as soon as the thing comes online, you can basically start selling it in its most basic form.
All right, Steve, rock and roll. 5 more minutes.
All right.
Do your best.
So my current debt situation, I switched to Founder Path about a year and a half ago, a year ago. Yeah. All right. Nate's a dick. So I borrowed $225 million over 6 tranches, and once again, more tranches is better, because that drives down your cost of capital. I switched here because it's cheaper, so 17% to 16.3%. Doesn't seem like a big difference, but actually when you're talking about $2.5 million, that adds up. And let's see, he would also loan more money. So ScaleWorks is at 4x MRR, he's at 8x MRR, and they might even go higher than that. They haven't told me. He hasn't told me no yet. But it's a very fast and painless process with him. I mean, because he connects into all your data, right? He can see my profit well and my bank account and my Stripe and all these things. Yeah?
I had a question. It really, so you're walking us through the structure, but I was thinking more about the decision making and the strategy, which is the folks I've generally been around have all been in the VC raising rounds and all of that. The time for making this decision of going via debt versus going the VC route seems to be one that you'd have to make early on. And now we get to see a lot of convertible notes, so safe notes and all of those kicking in. So there's this spectrum that exists now. When do you think this decision of going the equity route needs to be taken? And if you were to reflect on your own decision making, would you go this route or would you prefer to go the other route?
I think that the rule is debt before equity if you can get it. It's cheaper. Equity capital is super expensive. You can't get debt until you already have revenue. Once you can get debt, you should get debt. You stack equity on top of it. But even if you just push the equity round back 6 months, you get a bigger valuation. If you can push back the need by using debt, and it's not just on the A round. You can do the same thing on the C round. If you can, if you can push your C round back, because of debt, you want to do that. So you basically always, I'd say, if rule of thumb, always debt before equity if you can get it, and it's not 30%, right?
So it's not either or, a combination.
It's both. Yeah, absolutely. If you had some, first, in a SaaS business, VCs hate giving you money before you have $1 million in revenue anyway, right? But at $250K in revenue a year, you can get a small loan, right? And so you've probably done a couple tranches before VCs even come in, and then you do your VC round, start spending that money. A year after you get that round, because it should take you 2 years before you raise again, a year after you get that round, you stack on as much debt as you can, and then hopefully push back the B round, and you can do that every time. And as you grow, you can always bring in more money.
One last follow-up here. So if things go south with money, just walk away.
This is not. There's no. There's what do they call it? I'm not. I'm not. These aren't. None of these are personal guaranteed loans. So it's not like going to First Republic and or Silicon Valley Bank. They'll make you PG that. So, Founder Path dashboard, which I thought would be useful for people to see. So they would give me 2 million, almost 3 million in debt, and I've taken 2.2. So I could get that, I could get that just by going in and pressing this button. And what I've actually been doing is emailing them and saying, hey, I want exactly this much, because I don't want just all of it. I want to tranche it out. And that's why I've done 6 tranches with them last year and a half. Oh, if there was a slide to take a picture of, it's this one, because you got to checklist this if you ever get debt. Are there liquidity terms? This means hey, I just borrowed $1 million from you. One of my terms was you always have to have $500,000 in the bank. It's like, well, thanks. So you actually loaned me $500,000, but I'm paying for a full $1 million. I appreciate that. Are there any Ebitda or MRR covenants? Meaning, if you slow down in growth or if your profitability drops, you owe all the money. That's actually more common than you'd think. Can they demand you pay them back faster for any reason? Debt providers love to give you an umbrella when it's not raining and take away the umbrella once it starts raining, which is perfect. So they when times are bad, they'll often demand you pay back faster, and they'll have terms in your contract like, oh, on page 64, didn't you see that because you're growing more slowly now, you have to pay us back faster? You're like, well, that's perfect timing. So this is the one that I got, the early payback penalty. I couldn't leave and swap them out without paying them all a big penalty, and that's a negotiable term because it's total BS. Short-term loan is dangerous. We talked about that. They can control your use of proceeds. One I've seen is you can only use this to spend on marketing. So you can only spend on ad dollars with this money, and it's like, well, I'm already spending money on ad dollars. I need the money for it. I need the money for it. I don't. But they give you a card. I forget which one this was. They would give you a card that a credit card that you can only use the number for marketing. Super annoying. Terms matter. Go through all the terms very carefully. Have your lawyer friend look at it because sometimes terms can be tricky. Prepayment penalties is one to watch out for. There's a lot of fluffy ways that people are describing loans today. Yeah. Okay, 1 more minute. Gotcha. There's a lot of fluffy ways people are describing loans today. You can cut through the fluff by converting it all to APRs. They talk about loans in a lot of different ways. If you're taking them out of money and paying them back, it's all the same. It's a loan. You can convert it to an APR. And that is all. I guess my only point here was, this is hard. Forget about your hobbies. You're not going to be a good friend, son, daughter, mother. You got to ruthlessly prioritize. Identify the things that really matter to you and only do those things. It's not a good time to have a work-life balance. Getting these trains out of the station is really hard, but once these trains are in motion, they're super hard to stop. So those are my bits of wisdom.
Awesome. I'm out of time, but what about, profitability, cash in the bank? How much do they look at those things? There's just pretty much receivables, financings.
Depends on the lender. So some lenders, I mean, ultimately what you want to do is be making $10 million a year and $2 million in profit, and then you can get some real cheap loans.
Right.
But because a lot of lenders look at Ebitda and make loans on that, and those are cheaper loans. But I mean, it's hard to make $2 million a year in profit. And the reason they do that is because it's like, oh well, if you're taking $2 million a year in profit, even if things go kind of sideways, you're still going to pay your loans back. So these are all for earlier stage companies. These are all MRR based loans.
Do you have a favorite lender on that other case?
If you're profitable, I haven't gotten there yet, but
Mystery, right? Awesome, guys. We'll give it up for Steve Benson from Ebitda.